Hello and welcome to the Business of Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Eric Rosenberg. Over the years, I've had the privilege of helping businesses in the meetings and event industry grow and succeed. And I'm excited to share that experience with you. If you feel alone and overwhelmed, and if you're looking to take your business to the next level, improve your strategy and sales, and connect with like-minded professionals, you are in the right place. I invite you to visit eventbusinessformula.com and join our community of event business owners dedicated to exponential growth. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meeting podcast. And today is the day where I can finally speak with the international star. She is in the Hall of Fame, Speaker Hall of Fame. There's two types of people in Australia and in the US, the people who know her and the people she knows. She's talking about joy. She's talking about emotional intelligence, about change, about management, about leadership. She's absolutely phenomenal. And trust me, it's a unique balance between humor and extreme intelligence and deepness in all that she prepared. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know yet who I'm talking about, this is Amanda Gore. Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Eric, I'll be sending the check tomorrow or maybe this afternoon. Thanks for that great introduction. What, can you just come travel with me?
All right. No, but
I was even interested in listening to myself.
You definitely deserve it. So the first time I heard you speak, and I liked your energy, I like your style, and everything you're sharing is really deep and an impact on people. But before we get into that, my very first question that I ask all my guests, what's your journey?
And when he warned me about that, folks, I did do a bit of a grimace because it's like, oh, my journey. I mean, I'm a million years old and I've gone down 57 different rabbit holes. So I guess I'm not even quite sure how to answer it. But I'm an Aussie. I grew up in Australia. I became a physiotherapist, which is different from a physical therapist because we're kind of like a cross between chiropractors, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, respiratory therapists, blah, blah. Anyway, I did that for some years and I was teaching at college. And then I morphed into the corporate world. Back in the days when wellness was a new thing and people would look at me in Australia. They would do this in Belgium too, but not in the US. So I can't tell you exactly what they said in Australia, but they would look at me and go, well, what? What's that? Because nobody knew what wellness was. And from then I had co-authored a couple of books and somebody asked me to speak at a conference and I had done a lot of training. I didn't know anything about speaking. And there was an American there who was living in Australia who was a speaker and he was emceeing. So at the end of this event, he came up and said, you should be a speaker. And I said, what's a speaker? And then he mentored me into the business. I mean, if it was just us, Eric, I'd tell you another story, but it's not just us. And somebody would get offended if I made the funny comment that the Belgians and the Australians would laugh at, but possibly wouldn't. So I just don't want to offend anybody. Anyway, Ron mentored me into the business and I guess I've never looked back, really. I spent 10 years living in the States and then I went back to Australia and I've spoken in, I think 20, maybe 25 countries, I forget now. And one of my most fun, I've spoken about this for ages. I went to London and I was speaking at Cambridge to a bunch of financial planners and they were frightfully formal and the Brits are like. And we were at a dinner the previous night and it was a full-on formal dinner with toast to the Queen and all that stuff. And the next day I did my presentation. Well, I've never had a group of such formal people stand up and shout out, encore, encore, in a very British way.
That's amazing.
I don't know if that's part of the journey, but here I am living in Virginia Beach, about to move to Dallas. And I'm very grateful, A, for you, and B, for the wonderful welcoming nature of Americans to have me speaking here again.
Yeah, it's a unique country. And what I like here is that you have, as I always say, nobody's waiting for you, but everybody wants to help. And that's what I love in the spirit.
Yeah, and that's true. It's just great. And look at what you're doing for small businesses and solopreneurs in this sometimes challenging industry.
Yeah, well, not sometimes. Sometimes it's not challenging. Most of the time it is.
Yeah.
But I think as well, it's what people like in this industry. They get a kick of the unexpected was changing. But coming back to you, I was listening to one of your presentation. And again, intelligence that you have and the way you talk about it is phenomenal. But you're talking about the intersection of neuroscience, epigenetics, emotional intelligence, quantum physics. You call it the joy spot.
Yeah.
So, can you elaborate on that? And first of all, who is studying neuroscience, epigenetics, emotional intelligence, and quantum physics at the same time?
Well, I'm very old, and I started studying quantum physics when I was at college. So, honestly, back in the day, there were 5 of us in the class on quantum physics because it was so new. 45 years ago, maybe a bit more. I can't do the maths while we're talking. And I've been fascinated with it ever since. And it's turned up in so many different areas of study that I've embarked on. The neuroscience came about because, as a physiotherapist in Australia, we did a lot of anatomy and science. My degree was primarily a psychology degree. We almost got double degrees, and so it's a major in psychology. So it began back then, although neuroscience wasn't an official recognized science back then, I don't think. Epigenetics hadn't started, but because I would probably spend 3 months a year researching, studying new things, because I don't have a set speech. So, and I'd get bored if I did anyway. So I would study and then integrate what I had learned into whatever it was that I was speaking on at the time. And the kind of fundamental principles to everything, really. Because one of the amazing things I find, Eric, is that in the corporate world, people forget that we're leading humans or interacting with humans. And we have all these fancy strategies and KPIs and blah, 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 and bottom lines and things like that. But the thing is, you're dealing with a human, and humans haven't changed in the last 1,000 years. And we all want the same things, no matter what anybody tells you. We all want to be seen, valued, heard, acknowledged. We want to feel safe. We want to feel that we matter, that we're loved. So they're fundamental principles that you can apply whether in your tiny business, a big business, or in a mega business, because you're still dealing with people. And whether you're communicating in a group as a speaker or one-to-one. And so the intricate blend of neuroscience and how the brain works and how we can shift things, because, use it or lose it. I used to teach as a physiotherapist, because if you stop using a part of the body, it's going to stiffen up. It's got to be pumped, moved. Same with the brain. And then we prune things that we don't use. And I think one of the first areas I started off in is, as Alzheimer's was starting to creep up in incidence, if you look at how the brain operates, when you challenge yourself with something you've never done before, so it doesn't matter what age you are, if you've never spoken another language, learn another language. If you've never played a musical instrument, learn how to do a musical, just do something you've never learned before, because that's like fertilizer for the brain. It kind of recharges it. And so the neuroscience part is the pruning, when you listen to me, you'll learn things that you didn't know before. However, Lao Tzu said, we teach best what we most need to learn, number one. And number two, when the teacher is done, the student will say, we've done it ourselves. So I've spent many years trying to craft my message so that people will actually walk away and say, wow, that was great. She reminded me of so many things. But the truth is they didn't know them, or they weren't conscious of them. And that's a real badge of honor for me, that I've been able to craft the message in such a way that they integrate it and feel like they already knew it. So that's kind of the neuroscience part. The epigenetics part is fascinating. And if you've never read a book called The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, read it, because it's amazing. Or listen to him on YouTube. He's great on YouTube. And what epigenetics teaches us is that it's not our genes that determine our future. It's not our genes. It's our beliefs. And our beliefs come from the stories that we tell ourselves. And although I do change every presentation, many of them I include this because it's so fundamental to how humans operate. Because in essence, almost every grown-up is a toddler walking around in a grown-up body. And as toddlers between 0 to 7, and I share this too because I'm passionate about everybody being able to talk to their children, because the most important thing in life is how you feel about yourself. And if we can have children leave home feeling good about themselves, we'll transform the world. And between 0 and 7, epigenetics shows us, we, the toddler, tell ourselves stories. And those stories go on to become the fundamental beliefs that rule the rest of our lives. And these 3 core fears, I've never read about them in one place like this. It kind of came to me on stage one day, fell out of my mouth. And I'm like, wow, that was good. And the 3 core fears, I'm not worth loving, or I'm not good enough. And it's interesting because in the last, I guess maybe 8 years, I've been interspersing this. It used to be women would get, I'm not worth loving, and the men would be more inclined to say, I'm not good enough. But these days, they're both getting both. So whatever's happened in our quantum field, almost everybody walks around with a core belief they're not worth loving or they're not good enough. And then the second core fear is that I'm unsafe in some way. And that if you had a mentally unwell parent or an alcoholic parent, that's very common. I by the way, got the trifecta. That's how I know them so well. And then the third core fear is that I'm separate. I don't belong. I don't fit in. None of these are things that someone externally has to tell you, although they could. The real crunch is when we as a toddler listen to mummy or daddy yelling, and mummy and daddy go, well, toddlers don't go, oh, mummy, daddy, I know you haven't slept for 3 weeks because I haven't slept for 3 weeks. I know you're just tired. I know you love me. I know I'm good enough. That it doesn't happen. The toddler goes, I'm not worth loving. I'm not good enough. So for me, my dad was an alcoholic, pretty bad alcoholic. And my mum, I found out when she died, and I was 54, had left us for a year, and she never talked about it. I only found out because a man she went to live with wrote me a long letter and told me all about it. And I went to meet him, and a much longer story. But in that time, I think, because I can't remember anything about my childhood, I vaguely think I was maybe 2 or 3. And what I do know is that from the time I can remember, I took responsibility for my mother's happiness, because I, as a toddler, told myself if I'd been perfect, if I'd kept mummy happy, she wouldn't have left me. Yeah. And that was a pattern that went through my whole life. And to this day, I am clearing away the onion layers, and I'm 70, clearing away the onion layers of not feeling worthy to be loved. It wasn't so much, oh, yeah, well, the good enough kicks in. And social media, of course, for most people makes not good enough much, much worse because of the comparison. So the beliefs really matter. So we got the quantum field, the epigenetics, the neuroscience, and what was the other one?
Emotional intelligence.
Oh, thank you. Emotional intelligence. And I've just started talking about social intelligence because Daniel Goleman talked about emotional and social intelligence, and he basically linked the emotional intelligence to the individual emotional, feeling capacity. And the social intelligence was more within the group. And I'm playing now with expanding social intelligence into how we really communicate. We were talking before that I studied with Michael Grinder, who's probably the world's leading authority on nonverbal communication. And the social intelligence to me comes in more with how we read others. So the EQ is about knowing yourself and managing yourself. And even though Daniel Goleman says that it's also about managing relationships, it's the social intelligence to me is that capacity to tune into feelings, how others feel around you. Because at the end of the day, and with the people that you coach and who listen to this too, there are 2 kind of fundamental principles. 1, you're dealing with humans. 2, all humans operate on feelings. 3, business, ergo, is all about feelings. But we don't talk about it except for trust. And yet you think about it, psychological safety has become a really big issue along with the mental health issues. And, McKinsey came up the other day with a figure, 75% of people find their boss the most stressful part of their job.
I don't know where the stat comes from, but I think it was like 53% of people are living. Actually, you know what? I read this recently, and I think I should remember where it was, but it was fascinating that 53% of people are living their job because of their boss, not because of the
Yes.
company.
And what's more, there's some other research out there, and I can't remember if it was Gallup or McKinsey, because there's so much, that says the relationship you have with your boss has more significance on your overall life satisfaction than the relationship you have with a GP or other significant people in your life. But you read that and you go, wow. And then you stop and think about it. And it makes total sense. Where do you spend the vast bulk of your life, really?
Yeah.
Although since
Yeah.
COVID, it's hybrid or at home, but you're still trying to work with a boss. And now we don't have the capacity to interact with each other's heart feels and have a true sense of connection. We do it through a screen, which, you can still connect to the field through a screen. And that's what I do if I'm doing a virtual presentation. But day to day, it's just not the same as actually truly connecting.
Absolutely. My eldest daughter started working last summer after finishing her studies, and she could work, I think, like 2 days from home. And I told her, don't just go to the office. And guess what? By being in the office and then meeting other people, she learned differently. She has different opportunities. And I think we're getting back into balancing that. But is there any surprise that you have when in terms of human emotions, maybe in a completely non-professional setting when you thought, huh, that's very interesting what's happening here, and then maybe do the link with what you do with organizations?
Expand that a little. I'm not quite sure what you mean.
So when you're looking about human emotions,
Right.
okay, do you remember a situation when were you very surprised about the reaction of someone, and then it tells you a little bit more about how they would be in a professional setting?
Oh, I see what you mean.
But the reason I'm asking is that I don't believe anymore that people can be a certain person at home and another person in the business. They are who they are.
You took the words out of my mouth. Wayne Dyer used to say, when you squeeze an orange, what do you get?
Juice.
Orange juice.
Orange juice.
So whatever is inside you when you're squeezed under stress is going to come out. And once upon a time, I think there was a corporate persona or a work persona where you had to be a certain style. But I actually think Gen Y, Gen Z or Z have forced that to change because people want more authentic relationships at work, and they don't see work as well, I get this job and I do it for the rest of my life. I mean, we bred these Gen X's and Gen Y's and Gen Z's, and we complain about them and say, oh, they're so entitled and blah, blah, blah. Well, we bred them, and they're not going to do something they don't like, that they don't think is meaningful. And having meaningful relationships, I think, is part of that. So I reckon that's why we've seen the rise of Brene Brown with her vulnerability and authenticity. But again, see, to me, Eric, these are they're fancy words. Let's all be vulnerable because it's important to be vulnerable, and that's a good corporate word. Well, when you boil it down, what's vulnerable mean? It means being self-aware and recognizing when you're struggling with something and admitting it to someone else. And the someone else, if they had good social intelligence, EQ, and were self-aware, they would recognize the need to create the safety in which this person could be sincere, authentic, and genuine.
No, because you mentioned Brene Brown, and I listened to her recently where she is kind of not saying that you should not be vulnerable, and you should not always be vulnerable, and you should be self-aware of the people with whom and the environment and the context in which you are vulnerable.
Share. Yeah. But again, see, that's emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and discernment. We don't talk much about discernment, do we? But one of the things I do, I use a lot of symbols when I speak because people remember symbols, like the hello. And for nonverbal communication, the way I describe it is that we all walk around with invisible fish bowls on our heads. And in the fish bowls are sparkly bits. And my sparkly bits and your sparkly bits talk to each other all the time. And if what's coming out of my mouth doesn't match what's coming out of my sparkly bits, you will always, always, always pick up what? Sparkly bits. you'll never stick to the words. How many times have you, and so I have a headband with 2 pom-poms that come off that's all sparkly, but it's over there. It would mess the video up if I went to get it. But imagine I'm sitting here with pom-poms on my head with sparkly things and they bounce around. You walk into, let's say you've been at work or you've been in your office at home and you come out and you know something's wrong. Your sparkly bits are going, they're like antennae, right? You know, nobody said anything, but you just know something's wrong. That's because human beings, and epigenetics talks to us about this, we're like antennae, living antennae. We're picking up the field all the time. So we say to somebody, what's wrong? So I got, my sparkly bits on, and they say nothing. And you know there's a truckload wrong. And so it's that discernment to read what's going on and to maintain your own state. And, I think a lot of people have taken vulnerability and interpreted it as therapy and as an excuse. And they'll come and they say, yeah, but blah, 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 blah. And they have morphed into a victim in some way. Whereas authentic communication is kind of, you know what? I actually don't know the answer to that question. So you don't have to be imposter syndrome, knower of everything. And so there's that fine balance between honesty, integrity, nonverbal communication, and being able to be socially intelligent to read the other person, the situation, and work out just how much you can share that's relevant, that is not going to come back and bite you.
Everything you're saying, I'm thinking it's gold in a professional settings. Now, I can't help but think about, they're talking about all the generation, the Gen Z and millennials. By the way, I read and I totally agree, there is more common points between Gen X and Gen Z than between Gen X and millennials. I don't know what it is.
Oh, interesting.
But when you put millennials and Gen Z together, that's kind of interesting. But for me, this generation, or since COVID, and you have the online world, and there's a lot of Zoom, and which is fine. But nothing replaces face-to-face when it comes to human interaction, when it comes to understanding the other person, when it comes to relationship, when it comes to negotiation.
Yep.
So how do you translate everything you said now? What would you say to people in a professional setting? What should they do in order to create a better working environment and being able to apply emotional intelligence and being able to apply what they're learning about the sense they have of the environment?
If they're together physically or remote?
Yes.
Physically. Well, number one, the Institute of Heart Math is this wonderful organization, bunch of engineers who studied the human heart. And the human body is a giant bioelectric current. There's a purpose to this. And every organ in the body generates its own electric current, literally. And you might remember from school, every electric current generates a magnetic field around it. So the heart generates an electric current 60 times more powerful than any other organ in the body. That means it has a bigger magnetic field around it. And guess how far out from the body the heart's magnetic field goes? Think COVID, 6 feet.
6 feet. So that's 1.8 meters.
1.8 meters. And remember how far apart we had to stay? Because you separate people's heart fields. And once our heart fields are intersecting, we connect at a deep, deep level. And there's evidence that shows when someone has an angry, hostile heart, apart from the fact that is the number one predictor of heart attack. So if you're an angry, hostile person listening to this, stop it. Stop it right now. Slap yourself up the side of the head and deal with the anger, because your heart is going, and that anger and hostility in the field from the heart literally disturbs the EEG waves, the electroencephalographic waves in someone else's brain, anyone within that 6 feet field. So I joke, if I talk about this in a group, I'll say, so just nudge the person next to you or go hard like that, because if they're angry and hostile, they're screwing with your brain waves. So that's a part of it, to know that at work, we are literally interacting with each other. And for a very long time, leaders have talked to each other, people have talked to each other about gut feelings. Well, a lot of gut feeling is that interpretation of the field, is the sparkly bits giving you information. And we have neurons in the brain, in the gut anyway. We've got neurons in the heart and neurons in the gut. So it isn't just the brain that does the thinking. Literally, our hearts and guts do think. So when we're interacting with others, the most consistent core component for me is self-awareness. And that's actually coming up a little bit more in Harvard Business Review articles on leadership, where they're talking about having more self-awareness, because your state determines the field, which determines the culture and determines how you interact with everyone and the safety with which they feel. So understanding where you are, understanding the energy that you're feeling. Is it anxiety? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it overwhelm? Is it terror because somebody's going to find out you're not on top of things and you don't know what you're doing, or you don't feel you know what you're doing and you can't ask for help? So if you're in that sort of agitated state, that will be reflected back to you everywhere. And maybe not directly, but people are going to walk around going, did you get the boss today? Ew. Or if you're a solopreneur or a small business owner, then clients will pick that up too. Mm-hmm. So there's a kind of a fine balance in that self-awareness of noticing when you're being too critical of yourself, but not being too egotistical. And I think in some ways having a serving mentality really makes a difference. And if our perception, let's say we're in sales or leaders, anything, anytime you communicate with someone, it's interesting because with Zoom, Eric, we are facing each other, making eye contact through the camera. So if you consciously think about the field, we can connect in the field as well. We're connecting anyway, but being conscious about it makes it more effective. If we're discussing something controversial, on Zoom, it's more difficult to do, but in real life, what you can do is something Michael taught me, which is called How Not to Get Shot. And I can't teach it to you because it's so sophisticated, a couple of minutes. But essentially what it's doing is taking, if you and I talk to each other about something and we're aggressive or upset or not agreeing, then one of us becomes the problem, or each of us sees the other as the problem. Whereas if we take it off to the side and the problem's over here, you and I can have a relationship, a connection that's harmonious whilst we talk about the issue here. So that's a very simple and quick look at a very sophisticated tool to do it properly that can help us when we're interacting with people. So understanding yourself's the first part. The second part is to be curious and interested about the other person and what drives them. And it will be one of those three core fears. So if you're open, if you're comfortable with yourself and you're open and you're interested and curious, you're going to have a very good point to start any interaction with someone else. Mm-hmm. If you perceive yourself as here to serve, and that doesn't have to be a client, colleagues, I'm here to help you, I'm here to serve. How can I help you? Because that's human nature. We've crushed the early original human nature, which is to work together. We're in community. We had to be in community or we'd die. Something would eat us. And if you're excluded, that's why separation is such a big thing. And most bullies, if you're dealing with someone with bullying behavior, they have got, I'm not good enough, I'm not worth loving, I'm not safe, and I don't belong. And if you look at that, the behaviors that come out of a bully are precisely the things that someone who feels that way would do, because the only way they feel safe is to control. So if you understand that about everybody with whom you're interacting as well, it means that you start from a place of deep connection first, and then you can resolve the conversational differences, if you like. And the behavioral issues will always come from the fears. And if you're the boss, from the relationship with you. My ex-husband is still one of the top 2, maybe 3 best leaders I've ever met. And he never read books, but I forced him to write a book. And it's called The People Pill by Ken Wright, Mr. Wright. And it's a genius book. He was brilliant at leading people, and he's the most humble bloke. He's very smart, but he would spend weeks, if not days, thinking about how he could approach something that was going on with a person in a way that he could have that person think that what they needed to do was actually their idea, which is a master stroke of leadership. And he coaches people how to do that. He teaches it in the book to the best that you can. But on the phone, I don't know how he does it. He's got some sort of magical touch. But he can transform leaders and how they relate to others just in a coaching session on the phone. But in his book, he talks about that and other ways that he creates opportunities to relate to people. And on a slightly different level, so one to group, if you want to change the culture of an organization, and creating a more joyful culture is a really great idea. And I came up with a term I thought was so clever, Eric. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I thought it was so clever. It's called joyonomics. And it's
Joy, what?
joyonomics.
Okay. Oh, joy in the mix. Okay.
Yeah. So the value of joy at work. And of course, there's all this research that says joy affects the bottom line, happiness, engaged, happy workplaces. Well, everybody goes, well, duh, but do we have a strategy to incorporate joy at work? Not often. But with staff meetings, if you want to start to create a better culture, you can begin with a new ritual at the beginning of every staff meeting, whether it's in person or virtual. And everyone has to answer the question, what's the thing you're most grateful for since we last met? And if everybody knows this is the first question of every single meeting, they will come prepared. And if you think about the simple logic behind it, instead of coming to the meeting and go, oh, God, another meeting, I haven't got time for this, I've got 800 things to do, what are we going to do? We're thinking like, what am I grateful for? And even if you start off thinking, what am I grateful for? As you think about it, it changes your physiology. So by each one talking about things for which they're grateful, you transform the group dynamics.
Absolutely. By the way, when we have dinner every night with my daughters, we always have this the three good things of the day that happen.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I just one additional thing that listening to you make me think of when you talk about culture and talk about putting the topics on the side. It's not one on one, but it's on the side and people talking about it. I know that's why I want to have my own business. And I explain why. I want to build a culture that I think it's important with the values that we have. But I also enjoy the fact that if a team member or if a prospect doesn't have the same values, and I'm talking like deep, important values, I can fire them or I can decide not to work with them.
Yeah.
While in a larger environment, you might not always have that luxury. And that's something that's very important. That whatever I do, I'll give you a concrete example. When I see someone now with a keffiyeh, which is the Palestinian scarf, which is a terrorist scarf with our people that want to kill me and my people, I just don't want to talk with them anymore. It's not that I don't want to find the common ground. I don't want to find a place where I'm going to be talking with them. They're gone. They're wearing the Nazi sign, the modernized. I don't want to talk with them. If I am not my own boss, I don't have necessarily the luxury of making that decision. And I don't want to start talking about politics or religion now, but that's an example for me where above everything you said, because you are your own boss, because you are a solopreneur, or because you're a small business owner, you can decide for yourself what are the values that you're never going to compromise and decide that this is how you're building your business. That's the only thing that I wanted to add to all the great ideas you just shared.
There's one other thing that if you are forced to work with somebody that you don't particularly like, or you think their values are different from yours, if you do it with the same sense of separation, because both of us are judging in this situation, whoever these people are. So there's a judgment that leads to separation, and we're not seeing the common humanity. So one of the things that you can do if you have to work with this person, instead of going through the anger, angst, frustration, whatever it might be that you've given meaning to, you can choose consciously to become a good finder. So if you find one good thing about the person and you focus on that one good thing, it starts to shift everything else. And it's just a very simple little tool that even in your own business, if you've got someone who does share your values, but they irritate the crap out of you, before you fire them, if you decide you're going to, one of the best ways to give them a chance is to actually become a good finder, to find that one good thing about them and focus on that good thing. And what happens is at a field level, this person that you previously tell yourself, oh, not them again, they're driving me nuts, they're screwed up again, whatever it is, they know that. So if you come in and you're starting to find something good and you're focusing on that, they start to feel a bit better about themselves, which means they might start changing their behaviors, which means they might stop irritating you so much. And so you can ask, and then you don't get so frustrated. So you then coach them maybe a little better into what it is that you want. And I'm thinking small business situations,
Yeah, absolutely.
But great again, point you made.
I think what you just shared, it's absolutely brilliant. And I would say for me, at 90% of the case, this is great. And the 10% I just mentioned before,
yeah,
God, they want to kill me. So I don't even want to find one good thing. But I'm sure they have, but no way. Yeah. But no, it's a very, very good trick, especially with difficult clients or people you have to deal with. Amanda, I would listen to you for hours. That's
I could talk to you for hours too, Eric. This has been fun.
Thank you. Maybe one day I'll have a format like Joe Rogan where we can speak for 2.5 hours. But I'd like to finish by asking the last question about another topic you speak about, which is the joy of change. And when you say that change isn't something to fear. Now, this world has a lot of uncertainties. People hate uncertainties. This world is, I think we're at a crossroad with AI, which is absolutely phenomenal. I'm very excited with that. And there's also a lot of fear. So what would you say in terms of change, and why do you call it the joy of change, where actually a lot of people fear the change?
Well, firstly, it's kind of a marketing thing, isn't it? Because I remember Alan Deutschman, I think his name, wrote a book called Change or Die. And it's true. Our brains, it's a nice finishing point, really, Eric, because we started off talking about neuroscience and epigenetics and how, particularly neuroscience, if you learn something new, you develop the brain, you keep the brain alive, you keep the juices flowing. So change by necessity is something that's valuable for us because it keeps the brain growing. Learning a new language is not my idea of fun. For some people, they love learning new languages, but it's not such a big thing for them because it's easy. For me, it sucks. When my mum died, I bought a harp out of the money she lent me because I'd always wanted to play the harp. But well, that's not true. At school, they tortured us by teaching us how to play a recorder. I loathed music after that. Do you know what a recorder is?
Yes.
It's that horrible thing that makes awful noises when you're a kid and you can't play it. Anyway, I hated music after that, but I wanted to learn how to play the harp. It was so hard because I can't read music and I don't understand beat and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of sweet and sour because it was challenging, but I loved it when I got it right, or could make a nice sound out of the harp. And that's what change is like, really. And it's how you choose. I wish I could say there was some external force and that's the reason for everything, and we can just blame that. But we can't. It's us. Why do we find change so uncomfortable? What is it in us that makes uncertainty so difficult? And I've had to deal with that myself this last 2 years because I moved from Australia. I'm at 67, 68, and moved country again, even though I'd lived here before, but I moved to a place I'd never lived before. Then I left that place a year later, moved to another place where I'd never lived before, never knew and don't know anybody except the real estate agent. And now who knows what's going to happen? And
they say that the first time you move is the most difficult.
No, not my experience. It depends on the circumstances, I think. But, I wouldn't say I'm getting any better at it either. But that view of how we choose to see change. So we can see it filled with fear or filled with opportunity. And, people say that to you and you go, oh, don't give me that shit. But it's true. And
Agree.
I do the same thing. It's not like I'm mastered all of this and I'm a saint going, oh, joy, I can't wait to pack up my house and sell it again and move to another place and find a place to live. But I am choosing to see it as an opportunity in something. I'm not quite clear on what it is. Well, yeah, I am. But I'm choosing to look at it as an opportunity. So there is a certain amount of joy in accomplishment once you've gotten past the change. And you look back and you see what a difference it made for you. And truthfully, if you lived a life that was the same with certainty all the time, what was that movie where it was like perfect land all the time? I don't watch movies much, but everybody was beautiful and everything was perfect, and Stepford Wives or something like that.
I don't know.
Oh, well, anyways, some movie like that. If our lives were like that all the time, we would be bored stupid in
Absolutely.
months.
Yep.
So change is not only making your brain grow and develop and making you smarter, because stress makes you fat, sick, and stupid. Change does not make you fat, sick, and stupid. Change, if you perceive it as stressful, will, but change, if you perceive it as an opportunity, is a way of growing, developing your brain, expanding as a person, learning more about yourself, and doing what we actually came to Earth to do. I don't think we came to Earth to just have this blissful heavenly life.
That would be for another podcast because that's a long topic.
That is a long topic, isn't it?
Wonderful.
And fun to dive into one day.
I agree. Amanda, thank you so much. How do people get in touch with you?
My website's, I'm on all the social media, of course, but my website's amandagore.com. I still don't understand Instagram, but I do have a social media person. And I think it's Amanda Gore Joy, something like that. But amandagore.com. And my email's amanda@amandagore.com if I can help you at all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. This was such fun. You Belgians, you rock.
Thank you for tuning in to the Business of Meeting podcast. I hope you found today's episode valuable. If you enjoyed the show, the most important thing you can do is leave a review and share it with your colleagues. It really helps spread the word. I truly appreciate your support. And if you're ready to take your business to the next level, don't forget to visit eventbusinessformula.com to learn more about how we are helping even business owners like you. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.